Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up this week's theme of title tracks, looking at songs that share their name with the album that they come from. Today, we're going to be looking at something from the artist Miss Grit, who I've never actually heard of prior to today, not even like in passing. I don't think I've ever seen the name of this artist before, so that always interests me too. There's a lot of the usual bands that get circulated through the community for requests, and I always find it interesting when a new artist pops up. So this is from 2022. Looks like the album probably also 2022. Yeah, let's dive into this and see what Miss Grit is bringing to the table today. So we have this 3-4-1 that's really prominent here already. Okay, the intro seems a bit disconnected now. It doesn't seem to be a part of this main part. Lots of vocal stacks there, lots of digitization and effects put on the vocals. Gives it a very robotic sound. Snare on 1 or 2 and 4. Another beat 2 accents. Ooh. Yeah, okay, so the sax was nice, the guitar solo was interesting. Texture layering, vocals and sax. So that's 1 and 3 accents. Interesting. The vocals are okay. Interesting layering there. We have that offbeat accent from the horn coming in underneath the guitar. There's a lot of breath and airiness in the vocal delivery, which juxtaposes the very physical nature of a lot of this instrumentation. Ooh, this part feels kind of light. I think the guitar and synth are both really pushing for some higher pitched tones, some lighter timbres as well. The falsetto pushes upward too. There's lots of cool fluttery textures on the outside of that last section too. And for as expansive as that last section was, this one's more compressed. It feels tighter. The sax off to the right has a little bit of distance from me, but overall I'd say it feels closer, more claustrophobic, tighter. And then this synthy drone here. Cool. Yeah, that was a fun little track. I kind of interested in more of it. Not something that I would necessarily reach out for on my own, but based off of this one track, I don't feel like I have anything I'm currently listening to that falls in line with it. It's an interesting take on the synthy dance pop stuff, especially bringing in the sax and the guitar and layering melodies upon the vocal melody. Without, with a lot of pop stuff, I feel like when you have a vocal melody and you want to add another melody or another harmony, you just add another vocal track. The instrumentation is usually atmospheric. And so I like here how the instruments were also brought into the storytelling, the melody writing of this track. So yeah, I might dive a little bit more into this. I might check out the album. Not usually up my alley, but I don't know, something in it might click with me too. What's going on in this track though? So right from the start though, we had that intro. I don't know what was up with the intro. It never came back. Not a single part of it did. So we have like 30 seconds or so at the beginning that it just feels like lead in. Maybe it is the previous track on the album. It's the outro for that moves into this a little bit. I'm not sure. That's about as far as that guessing is going to go. But once we get into the main part of the song, we have this constant eighth note idea in the background. It's this low bouncing drone of a synth. It's just there all the time, constantly going. I don't think there's a single part of the song it isn't in. It pushes the song forward. It keeps a nice brisk pace throughout, and ensures that the song never feels like it ever stagnates anywhere. It's always moving somewhere. But then the drum part comes in. And this is interesting because it sets up a recurring rhythmic pattern. 4 on the floor bass kicks, snare on 2 and 4. Emphasized beats 2 and 4 show up quite often in here. In fact, on the chorus, the vocals actually start on beat 2. Beat 1 is silence. You get the sound of the bass kick and maybe whatever instrumentation is starting their pattern. But then beat 2 is when the vocals kick in. There's a light accent on 4, and then less of an accent on the next 2 and the next 4, and then the silence on 1 into the strong beat 2 again. This actually shows up in a lot of places. The verse, the chorus, the second part of the bridge, emphasis on 2 and 4 from multiple instruments. I don't think there's any deeper meaning to it. It's just a pattern I continue to pick up. I tried to tie it to Cyborgs, and the only line I really picked up from the chorus was something about I'm a real girl, I'm a live girl, or something like that. So this feeling of artificiality that wants to be living is a theme of the track, possibly. I don't know how you could tie 2 and 4 into that. But it is a pattern I consistently found in here, in multiple sections from multiple instrumentation. But we do have at the beginning of the bridge an emphasis on 1 and 3. I think this is really interesting. I don't know what to pull from it yet. Maybe there is nothing to pull from it. Maybe it's just time for a little bit of a switch up. But I'm also hoping that maybe in the lyrics, whatever's being sung here represents another side of things, a different perspective, possibly, or, being on the grass is always greener on the other side. So now we're on the other side, that kind of idea. Simply because it is the only place in the song that shifts from 2/4 emphasis to 1/3 emphasis. And that stood out to me. It stood out to me just as much as everything really hammering home the 2 and the 4. So I'm curious if there is any deeper meaning to that, or if it was just simply a musical choice. After having snare on 2 and 4 for so long, they're like, you know what? This is getting boring. Let's put it on 1 and 3 with no deeper thought. That's always uh, a possibility. But like I said, it is something I noticed, and it's pretty consistent in this track. Now, we also have another type of duality in here. A lot of the instrumentation is very direct. You listen to the drony bass bounciness underneath. That's a very physical sound. You listen to the drums. Yeah, lots of reverb on the snare to give it this larger, more electronic drum sound. But the bass kick, the snare, very punchy and physical. The guitar, sax, yeah, they're very present. They take up their space. But you listen to the vocals, and they don't. The vocals are very light and airy and ethereal. There's a lot of breathiness as part of the vocals. And even more so when we get to the end of the song and we start pushing into the falsetto there, we have even more of a lack, or I suppose even less physicality to the vocals. Part of this is the falsetto, but I think there's also a lot of production technique going on in order to sort of stretch them out and make them feel like they take up a lot more space, almost turning them from a distinct point that the vocals come from into a sonic fog. This is another part that I'm curious if it has any deeper meaning to. There is a strong division between what is typically the spotlight instrument in this type of music, which would be the vocals. You normally want them to be more present in the mix. And here they are, but because of their ephemerality, they also get kind of lost in the mix at times. This was one of the reasons I had a tough time coming away from this with any lyrics having been heard. I do think that there is a presence of the vocals, but often too, especially towards the end of the song, they got stuffed into the mix. Other instruments began to dominate over them, especially as the sax and the guitar came in alongside the falsetto vocals. There's just no way I was going to hear what the vocals were saying at the time, and that seems purposeful. Maybe it's purely aesthetic. Maybe there is a thematic or artistic reason for it, but it does seem purposeful because it is not the status quo for this type of genre, for this type of style of music. And all of this makes me want to get into the lyrics because I see these elements of duality, of creating a status quo and then seeing the opposite of it. Or there at the end, putting the two opposites together as far as we're talking about physicality of instrumentation and like ethereal instrumentation. There's also a bit of I don't want to say clashing of sounds, but the sax and guitar very rarely interact with the vocals in any meaningful way. They're usually doing counterpoint, where one of the instruments, or sometimes both of the instruments, will just be doing their thing while the vocals are also doing their thing. There's also, more often than not, the trade-offs. The vocals are done singing, so we're going to bring an instrumental part in. That might actually just be aesthetic. That's just how a lot of music is written. You have one lead at a time, and when you're done writing vocals, you write an instrumental line. I mean, even rock and metal do this. So maybe that doesn't warrant drawing attention to it, but I do think that when you pair that with the idea that they rarely interact even when they're going on together, and we only had one instance of texture layering, I think it was a single line in the second verse of the vocals and the sax playing the exact same thing, that there is a division between these two. And since there's already a division sonically between them, we can add more thematic weight to this. Not only do they sound very different, not only do they take up very different places and aspects of the track, but they also very rarely intermingle. When we already have a song that I think is about someone who wants to be in a different place than they are, having this duality of melody, it's stuff that I just can't ignore. Maybe it means nothing, but I see these patterns and I kind of hope they mean something. I suppose the last thing I want to touch on then is the layers and density at the end of the track. Not only did I mention we have the falsetto vocals, we have the sax and the guitar, but there's also the two drums, the synth, the rhythmic synth, and the drums, but also all of this fluttering, shimmery stuff on the outskirts of the song too. It becomes something that feels like glitter, but also very uplifting. I mentioned while I was listening to it that the penultimate section and the final section as well end up feeling like gravity has been lost. Part of it is the textures of the instruments. The vocals in particular start aiming for higher pitches. We enter the falsetto range, which feels lighter and more ethereal, but even the guitar has begun to work with higher pitched ideas. There might be some production stuff going on in here as well. Maybe the twinkling also allows it to feel like it has some levity that it didn't originally. Regardless, most of this song feels very rooted and grounded until those final 40 seconds or so, where the song begins to, in a sense, take off. Not like a rocket, but to simply rise up out of where it is. Once again, I don't have a very strong read of this, but it is something that my attention was brought to. I don't have an understanding of the story as a whole yet. I feel like generally speaking, the song is pretty static throughout. We have these minor nuances of change, but we don't have any overarching, vast, atmospheric changes. It's not like the song goes between a high energy section and like a ballad or anything like that. It's pretty consistent with its tone and atmosphere throughout. So I find it interesting that, at least as far as I can tell, there is a lot of instance of, alternate direction, where we basically have two opposing ideas, either presented at the same time or one right after another for contrast purposes. And I guess that really is the word for it. There's a lot of contrast in here, despite the static atmosphere of it. There are, in the more nuanced elements, contrast and dynamics. And because of the rather static atmosphere, I'm curious what all of the dynamic elements, what they represent or might represent. So let me dive into some lyrics here and see what's going on there. The song appears to be about being someone that you're not, or something along those lines, possibly. Verse 1 is interesting. It says, "I'll wake up pretending and then I'll wake up again." Almost as if it's a dream within a dream concept. They wake up and are forced to pretend. They realize that that's not the reality, so they will wake up again. It says, "I'll leave my mouth wide open and then let her say the rest." I'm curious who the her is. Leaving the mouth wide open would imply that there is a her inside the mouth that is going to speak. But at best, that's an implication. I don't know. The pre-chorus just says, I was born to pose, I was born with clothes. My best interpretation of this is that the narrator is somebody who wanted to be a model, fashion model, from like the very beginning. This is just something that's built into their DNA. The chorus, though, goes in a different direction. It just says, I'm a living girl, a real living girl, your real living girl. Now, this is interesting because the second chorus comes around and we say these same lines once again, but we repeat them, swapping out girl for boy. The post-chorus says born again, not again. This going into that double wake up, I think. But I don't know the connection. I just see a thread. And then the outro simply says follow the cyborg over and over and over. There is a second verse, and this is what makes me think that there is an element of not being who you think you are or feel you should be. It says, on all of my screens, she's in all of my mirrors. Through the window and inside my home, I am alone. I am my ghost. It's almost as if they see this projection of who they want to be. Possibly this fashion model, as the pre-chorus suggests. Maybe they aren't somebody who poses with clothes all the time, but it's someone who they feel they want to be or should be, or maybe it's just who they are. But it's not who they currently are. And it haunts them. They feel like they're a ghost, a remnant, something that people can't see, something that was a part of something else. I get hung up on the born again, not again, the waking up pretending and then waking up again, this concept of cycles and repetition, of birth and rebirth. Waking up can be seen as a type of birth. I mean, there's the whole like philosophical angle that it goes over my head a little bit, but the idea or the concept, I suppose, that when you go to sleep, you wake up a different person with the same memories, but a different person entirely. This idea of death and rebirth through sleep. I don't know. The follow the cyborg part comes out of nowhere. And I'm really curious what that's supposed to mean to Miss Grit. Or I assume Miss Grit's the artist, but there have been times when I've confused artists for bands too. It seems like an artist name, and it's like, no, the band just chose a name like that feels singular. But whoever wrote the lyrics for this, I'd like to ask them what they meant by this. Do I have I don't. Vocals are Miss Grit. Legit saxophone player in here, but it doesn't seem like there is a guitarist. I wasn't going to necessarily make that distinction because whether it's a guitar or sax sound or an actual guitar synth doesn't really change the end result, that there is an implied synth here. But there was a legitimate saxophone player, Casey Fassett. We did have a drummer here, Stella Mozgawa. I hope I pronounced that correctly. But I don't see lyricists. It does say it was written by Miss Grit and Stella, though, so possibly they worked together for the vocals, for the lyrics. I'm curious, really, what Follow the Cyborg means and how that relates to this idea of birth and rebirth and non-birth. Birth again, but not again. Waking up and then waking up. and how all of that relates to being someone on the outside that you're not on the inside, wanting to, I don't know, be born again as the person you perceive yourself to be. That's what I read out of this. The idea, well, see, there's the other thing too. The second chorus, I'm a living girl, a real living girl, swapping it out to I'm a living boy, a real living boy. Does that just, is that an attempt to make it more open? Anyone can listen to this and kind of follow along with it, find themselves in it some way, or is this kind of alluding that this concept of uh, not being the person you envision yourself to be and kind of wanting to be something else, is it more of a trans anthem here? I don't have the experience to really dive into that, and I feel like even my reading of that is a bit more of a surface level read. I can't say that there's anything in here that distinctly goes in that direction, but I do think it can be read from that perspective. And that might, I mean, the whole concept of not being who you think you should be, I think, is represented in the separation of the song, the separation of the instrumentation, the separation of the physicality of some of these. We can even look at maybe the way that they are now, who they don't want to be, is the ephemeral part. It's the part that just lacks that presence, and they want someone who can take up space. They want to be someone who is noticed. But it could also be the element of the reality versus the dream, in a sense. What is now versus what they want, where one is real at the moment and the other is conceptual in the mind. And maybe they want to reverse those roles. Like there's a lot of ways that we can interpret the music and the duality of the music within this theme of not being who you think you should be. Yeah, there's a lot more depth to this than I originally envisioned, and that just makes me want to dig into Miss Grit's music even more. But we're gonna wrap that up. These are my thoughts on Miss Grit's "Follow the Cyborg." What did you think of this track? Is there anything that stood out to you? Anything that you would like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own opinion or interpretation of this. Put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. It takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow, though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. We're going to check out an entire album. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.